My name is Robert Nathan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of LoadDelivered's. We are one of the fastest growing 3PLs in North America. Specifically, we're achieving our growth by taking a different approach to technology and implementing it within our organization. And now I'm excited to talk a little bit about the future of the transportation industry. A lot of exciting activity going on. Specifically in 2015, we're seeing a lot of new business models, a lot of new competition. We're seeing margin compression. We're seeing customer service requirements increase, and I think it's just a wonderful time to take a holistic view of the future of transportation. So getting into the presentation, I want to tell a little story. And the story is about a mentor of mine, Art Mesher, who in the 90s came up with a concept of sort of a thesis that discussed the future of commerce. And his thought was that in the past, one company had one product that would deliver one service to a customer. And that unique service or product would be very beneficial to a customer. However, a company was limited because they weren't able or weren't willing to integrate with other companies. And his vision was eventually one day there would be organizations that instead of one service, one product, there would be a future where all companies would begin to work together in order to create these interests in an effort to service customers. So where in the past companies were siloed off with one product, the future state was interconnected companies leveraging each other's services in order to provide optimal levels of services for their customers. And people sort of thought he was crazy because they said, why would companies share resources? Why would they leverage each other in order to grow? Why wouldn't they just do it themselves? Well, the reality of the situation is if we jump forward 25 years ago, we're in a world where people are connecting, people are optimizing, and people are sharing. But not just people, companies are. And in the business-to-business world, where we live in a world where it's all about customer service, companies are figuring out that it's easier to share and build these end trusts in order to provide optimal levels of service, opposed to just being in their silos. So this world of connected, optimized, and sharing is tremendous and very exciting. Now, Art was a little ahead of his time. What he did is he deployed his thesis on a company called Descartes. Descartes grew from a small company, very limited resources, to $1 billion plus company over the 10-year period that he was their CEO, and is now one of the most profitable software as a service companies, dollar for dollar, in the world. So he deployed this thesis on his company, and it's interesting to see how now the world is starting to evolve, and supply chain experts are starting to listen to a more holistic shared service. People are connecting, people are optimizing, and people are sharing. Now the big question is the future of commerce a good thing or a bad thing for the transportation industry? You talk to different board members, different CEOs, different industry leaders, and they're all asking, what is going on in this industry? Will there be disruption? Will there be evolutionary technology? How will this affect your business model? Will margins compress? And how is your company going to evolve through this realignment in the next generation? Well, the answer, we think, is very clear. You can either adapt or you can die. And it's very, if you look at business models over the course of history, companies that have been able to adapt do thrive. And I think in this next 5-year period, will there be an Uberization of trucking? Probably not. But will there be an evolutionary standard of how to conduct business? Absolutely. And I do think that when you see some companies, some CEOs, some board of advisors panicking in both the private and public markets, I think there's a reason and why they are, and they're going to need to evolve pretty rapidly. Industry landscape, before we get into talking more about the shared economy, I just want to talk a little bit about the landscape. in the current state of affairs in the logistics industry, which are always evolving, always changing. But let's just take a little snapshot right now. We're currently in this world where there is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. We are looking at the ubiquitous dissemination of mobile technology, which creates an environment where drivers, 3PL, shippers, everyone is transparent. And you really need to figure out how to embrace that transparency in order to really be a relevant player within the supply chain field. So in terms of the industry, what we're seeing margin compression. We're seeing RFP standardization, companies taking a different, more data-centric approach to conducting their standard RFPs on a yearly, annualized basis. They're using technology to do so. When you talk about driver shortage, is it real, is it not? I was talking to some of the largest largest full truckload carriers in the nation last week. And I said, I don't believe that the driver shortage is still prevalent. And their comment was, yes, it is. It's just no one wants to talk about it right now. So we're still in this era, although there is a lot of capacity right now, we're in an era where the driver shortage will increase. Talk about trucks, you talk about will robots be in the trucks in the next decade? Most likely, but what are we going to do between now and the next 5-10 years? So you see the margin compression, the standardization, the driver shortage, fuel prices dropping, and you see all these different components in the supply chain, and I think it's important to assess what's going on here, what's important, and what's our next move as an industry, and specifically as your respective companies. So what is the sharing economy? Everyone's talking about the sharing economy. You know, your kids might be talking about it in high school or college. Your families might be using a shared economy resource, whether it's Airbnb, Uber, or a variety of shared resources, companies based on shared resources. But the most important thing to understand is this is not a fad. The sharing economy is not a fad. It is not coming and going. It is a movement, and it's a movement because it's surrounded and it's based on the basic premise of customer service. It is better for the people, better for the user, and therefore companies are starting to pop up because consumers love this type of interaction. And the next step will be in the B2B space. I believe that companies will also embrace the sharing economy mentality. When you talk about the sharing economy, you know, it's interesting. We've been conditioned since we were kids that sharing is good, sharing is caring, sharing is good for the world. But why has business been so slow to adopt this basic, simple practice that people are sort of accustomed to from an early age? When you look at what a sharing economy is, the definition is a socioeconomic ecosystem that is built around the sharing of both human and physical resources. It includes the shared creation, production, distribution, trade, and consumption of goods, services by different people and organizations. So the beauty and the power is you can have access to a good, access to a service without having physical ownership. So having access to a greater amount of resources without ownership is good for business on a variety of levels. And I'm going to move right into it. When you talk about the sharing economy, you talk about these startups. This is a really exciting time in our industry. You have a lot of these large legacy companies, and little startups are starting to spring up and are starting to systematically dissect and take care of one of the services that these old school and legacy companies might look at. And in this slide, you see FedEx, the behemoth, and slowly all these startups, the Silicon Valley startups, some Chicago startups, some New York startups, all over North America, you're seeing these unique venture capital funded, private equity capital funded businesses that are really starting to evolve. Now, where I think some of these companies are going to fall short is the amount of money it's going to take to systematically disrupt a $600 billion plus industry. It's a massive industry, But in order to scale, it takes a lot of capital, a lot of resources, and a lot of industry knowledge. So I think this is an exciting time. And I do believe that success in a collaborative economy is all about creating and nurturing the customer relationships and making their buying experience as easy as humanly possible. And what all these companies do is that's what they are representing. They are making it easier for both consumers and companies to systematically procure shipping services in a much more digestible manner. So this is an exciting time again. I'm very interested to see how these companies will evolve the next 12, 24 months. I think you'll see some of these companies scale. I think you'll see some of these companies fall off and sort of level off at a couple $1 million in revenue. Moving forward, how will the sharing economy affect us? How will the sharing economy affect you? If you're a large third-party logistics company, if you're an asset-based trucking company, or if you're one of those companies on those lists, you know, what's really interesting to hear is that, you know, we did this whole assessment. We did a lot of research on the sharing economy as we were analyzing how to implement sharing economy principles into the basic fundamentals of load-delivered logistics. And we started to assess this, and we started to have light bulbs popping up because we are already sharing. Now, we are sharing in a very different way than Uber, but it's actually, there's a lot of similarities and common basic principles. When you look at less than truckload, when you look at optimization, when you look at cross-docking programs and omni-channel distribution, we're doing a lot of sharing, specifically in the third-party logistics arena. So that's a very interesting place. I think you'll see some more sophisticated ways that companies are sharing, but less than truckload was a great example. When you look at drop trailer programs, talk about a great example of shared resources in order to optimize warehouse and distribution methodology. You have drop trailer programs that large Fortune 500 companies are engaged in because they systematically need access to more storage. So that's a really interesting space. You'll see some companies pop up, you already have, that are starting to do some dynamic drop trailer programs as well as sophisticated warehousing that can flex up or flex down. We don't want to talk about that because I think this is one of the most antiquated ways, or an area that really does need to be disrupted in the industry. Load boards haven't really evolved in the past 20 years. You have these legacy load boards that I do not believe will be there in the future. I think that there's going to be some big disruption. You see a variety of companies that are popping up that are really aggregators and are doing things a little differently, whether it's Cargomatic, 10-4 systems, logistical labs, companies that are just approaching the whole load board game in a much different manner than the legacy organizations do. But again, load boards are a form of matching, even though it's archaic. The current legacy providers, that is a way where the supply chain and transportation industry has embraced traditionally. So technology in the sharing economy, this is the exciting part. What is technology? What are we trying to really solve here? We're trying to improve the customer experience. So any technology that is implemented within an organization or that's developed, you know, how is it improving the customer experience? Not just experience, price, efficiency, and evolving the way that you're conducting business. Going local, I think this is a very ripe, interesting marketplace way to really dive in the sharing economy. Last mile delivery, this is a growing segment, omni-channel distribution. We've seen a lot of success in getting involved in shared economy resources within the last mile segment. Creating marketplaces, you see some marketplaces popping up. You know, I think marketplaces are really strong from a transparency level, but what I believe is that the top 50, the top 25 3PLs in the nation right now, what they've done is they've created marketplaces within their organizations. So these Uber-like models, they're not doing anything new, just branding themselves in a different manner. More power to them. I think it's great. But they're just essentially replicating what already is existing the top 3PLs. Opportunity. So let's just talk about opportunity. Where's the opportunity for you and your customers? Where's the opportunity for your organization? We think there's a lot of space out there for improvement, and there's a lot of ways to service your customers. So at the end of the day, how can we develop technology? How can we embrace the sharing economy to improve your customer's experience? This gets left out of the picture quite all too often. Entering new markets, the ability for companies to systematically enter new markets is unbelievable. I mean, the barrier of entry to enter a new market is fairly simple if you have the right technology and the right process. And I think that's what the sharing economy is also very exposes us to. Expand your service offerings. Again, there's an opportunity to expand service offerings very easily within the sharing economy framework. And this is what I always ask in a question I talk about with industry friends, with industry leaders, with industry mentors. Who in this room will be the next Uber of logistics? Will the Uber of logistics even exist? Will Uber be the company that actually does this? So I think there's a lot of different scenarios that will play out in this next evolution of transportation. And I think we're all, if you're listening to this or you're engaged in learning, then you're one step ahead of the game. Then you're going to see a lot of exciting new developments in the next 24, 36 months. And hopefully, as an industry, we will all figure out how to embrace new technologies and new ways of thinking. Because at the end of the day, we can either sit on the sidelines or we can sort of look at what's going out in the world of technology, embrace it, and start to deploy that technology within our frameworks. So thank you very much. It's an honor always to talk, and I look forward to meeting many of you one day. Thank you very much.